Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the GD Report. I am G.
And I am D.
Are you sure you're D?
I had to think about it for a second.
Right.
There's only two choices. It's kind of like an election we have.
Right. Yeah. And so tonight we have it's a special edition, and we have a historic thing to talk about. So regardless of how tonight's vote went, and we're talking about the senatorial runoff in Georgia. Regardless of how that went, Georgia was going to elect its first ever black senator, and that's pretty historic. When
For
you
a
get
full
to
for a full t- for a full term.
right? Yeah, for a full term. Sorry,
Senator Warnock had already been elected. We'll talk about the results, but I mean, this is his fourth election in 2 years, by the way, that he's had to go through.
Yeah, and a couple of the pundits were talking about that on tonight's TV coverage. But so let's just jump into it. So the race was Georgia University football hero Herschel Walker,
Texas resident,
yes, versus Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church where Dr. Martin Luther King once presided. Senior pastor Raphael Warnock, who won a special election a couple years back to fill an unexpired term, and this was for a full 6-year term. And so let's just, before we get into tonight's results, let's just talk a little bit about the race. So tell us a little bit about how Herschel ran his campaign.
Well, it started off where he was anointed by former president, twice impeached, and now chief executive officer and president of an organization called the Trump Organization that was just found guilty and liable in civil court today of I think tax evasion, fraud, whole bunch of charges.
But guilty on all counts.
Yeah, Donald Trump anointed him as the candidate that he wanted in this election. He's, I believe, he played football in the USFL for Donald Trump.
He did for the New Jersey Generals.
Yep. And Donald Trump had him on the Celebrity Apprentice, as a contestant as well. And so he's a longtime friend of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump said, "I want him as the candidate in this election," and he anointed him, and they pretty much cleared the field for him. Mitch McConnell initially wanted David Perdue to run again.
Former Senator David Perdue,
who lost last time, wanted him to run again. But Trump pushed him to run against Brian Kemp instead, because Kemp had stood up to Trump when Trump tried to overturn the election and commit the coup against us in 2020's election. So cleared the field for Herschel. He would not do any debates with any of the Republican candidates. Very rarely made any appearances. The press was only on Newsmax, Fox News, right wing, very safe places for him to go. He won the nomination, and debate went back and forth about the debates with Raphael Warnock, and ended up, I think, doing one. Did they do two debates? I think they did one.
I think they did one, yeah.
They did one debate. I think they did a second one where Walker didn't show up for it. And Warnock, on the opposite side of the fence, really he had a beautiful strategy for this election. People want to say Georgia's a swing state, but Brian Kemp won by like 10 points, almost 8 points, I think,
right,
statewide for re-election against very popular Stacey Abrams. So I don't really view Georgia as a swing state. I'd say it's purplish red. I think there's definitely, the urban versus rural votes. But Warnock did a smart thing. He started off running his campaign on the accomplishments he'd made in the Senate. He talked about his bipartisan work, about how he passed an infrastructure bill working with Ted Cruz. He'd passed a maternal health bill working with Marco Rubio, and talked about how he was a consensus builder and all the things that he cared about in the state of Georgia. That was his campaign. He didn't focus on Herschel. He didn't focus on Herschel's problem. Kind of just sat back and let Herschel self implode.
Right.
And as we got
And-
closer to the election, more and more things came out about Herschel. Obviously, Warnock came in first in the election, but didn't have the 50% plus one to be able to avoid a runoff. And then in the runoff, then he hit Herschel hard.
Right. Well, so Herschel's campaign, you said something about implode. So were there bumps in the road for Herschel coming down the?
Yeah, everybody knew he was an imperfect candidate, to say it lightly. A lot of other people would say maybe a dumpster fire.
Right.
You know, a deep history of mental illness that he's talked about in some of his books that he's had ghost written. He has a long history of abuse against women. His first wife and his son from that marriage abused them both, threatened them both.
Yeah.
Held a gun to Cindy's head a couple different times where it's documented. And then there were girlfriends along the way also that talked about the abuse he had, and then his such staunch support for a national ban on abortion when at least two women came forward and said that he had pressured them into having abortions from the pregnancies that he had created with them.
Right. So he had a lot of things to overcome. He's not the greatest speaker in the box. One thing that stood out to me was when he said he confused election with erection.
Yeah.
And he just made so many just mistakes that you just wonder what the powers that be in the Republican hierarchy saw in him.
Yeah, I think they saw somebody that they thought a couple things. I think they saw somebody who would be compliant and just vote however they wanted him to.
Right.
I think they thought from a race standpoint, you've got a very popular African American senator and Senator Warnock. They thought we can just run another popular African American against him and beat him.
Right. Well, yeah, I was watching some of the coverage, and there was a black woman on one of the panels, and she said that she felt insulted that the Republicans would think that Georgia black people, the black population, would just vote for any black person.
Right.
That this harkens me back to when another black candidate ran for office, and the Republicans did pretty much the same thing. In fact, they were so crass back then. The campaign slogan they ran for their candidate is, if you're going to vote for a black man, you might as well vote for ours. And
Right.
I'm talking about Alan Keyes versus then State Senator Barack Obama for
Right.
the Senate seat in Illinois that propelled him into the White House. So, you would think that they would learn. One of the pundits I saw said, Republicans need to learn to run better candidates. And I think if you look across the board, Mr. Trump had a lot of his preferred, some would say hand-picked candidates. And the only one of them I think that won was J.D. Vance, correct?
Right.
And I think the Democrats looking back are kicking themselves in the butt, because I bet you if they'd have put a little more money into that race, that Vance might have lost that. What do you think?
Possibly. I think Tim Ryan jumped the shark a little bit with his message. We can deep dive on that one someday, but I think he was a little too anti-Democratic Party.
Right.
And I think he thought that was going to play, and I understand why he did that message. I think
Right.
he thought that was going to resonate with some of those white working class, blue collar type workers. And if they want somebody anti-Democratic Party, they already got a Republican candidate. So
Right.
So I think in a way, I think he may have turned off some Democratic voters. But
Right.
but yeah, you're absolutely right. You look at the handpicked people, and Trump didn't get on the JD Vance train till very at the end, and people thought he was going to endorse Josh Mandel in that primary, and so you're looking at a pretty bleak record of his picks as far as the people he
Right.
picked and endorsed, and to your phrase, handpicked. I mean, you look at Dr. Oz lost his race. You look at Kerry Lake and who was the other Blake Masters in Arizona.
Right.
You look at
his Senate candidate in Arizona, in Nevada.
Adam Laxalt in Nevada. I mean, all lost, and those were states that they thought were winnable. And so now you've got the Democrats with the 51-49 majority, which means even at 50-50, even though they had the vice president's vote at 51-49 now, they get majorities on all the committees, because
Right.
at 50-50 the committees were still split evenly.
Right.
So now they're going to have majorities on the committees. So you're going to see stuff get advanced out of the Senate committees. Now, we know it's not going to go very far in the House unless Democrats can get enough votes to bring things to force votes on the floor, which is possible. You're looking at some of those more moderate Republicans that just, especially the ones that just won in New York, because
Right.
they're up in 2 years and they're going to be facing some serious heat, some serious blowback. And so, it's a big night for the Democrats. It is a big difference, 51-49, 50-50. Plus,
Right.
it gives them a little cushion. In 2 years, the map is going to be very much in the favor of Republicans. There's going to be a lot of tough seats for Democrats to defend, but having an extra seat already in the bank, that helps.
Right. Well, I think, for our democracy, our republic to function like the founding fathers envisioned it, although that none of them really envisioned political parties, but we need both of these parties to have good people, the best and the brightest, and they need to get up there. They need to have healthy, not acrimonious, like we've seen in the past, healthy debates. They need to come together and make decisions that are good for the country, and they need to get stuff done. And I think this election is hopefully the final nail in the coffin of Mr. Trump's influence of running roughshod over the Republican Party. I know that he's already announced that he's going to run for president. I expect him to drop out probably around August. He's facing a lot of challenges personally. As you mentioned, his company just got his company just got convicted, and with that now is going to be follow-up. They're probably going to come after Trump personally for tax evasion. That's not going to look good. That's a metric that's going to play out in the courts for a while. That's
usually the case that gets most big time criminals. I mean, that's what got Al Capone.
Yep.
It wasn't the bootlegging, it wasn't the prostitution, it wasn't the bookmaking, it was the tax evasion.
Right.
It's easiest to prove.
Yeah, and I think most of us thought that Mr. Trump played fast and loose with the numbers. I mean, he calls himself a billionaire, and those that follow such things, particularly Forbes, have said, they came out and said he probably isn't a billionaire. He's more like a 400 millionaire. So, it's not a stretch to think that he might be guilty of tax evasion. And there's other things, those documents that he took from the White House that he said he was entitled to, that case is going to come forward now. But the Democrats have an opportunity here, and they really ought to seize upon it. So we were in the pregame tailgate show, we were talking about the makeup of the courts. And, I think, Joe Biden is opposed to expanding the court, but if you want to ensure the Democrats keep winning elections, the best way to do it is to add 4 seats to that court and make them all liberal judges.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing is, you talked about having 2 parties, and I think it's a matter of having another party that is a good faith party.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I'm with you. I think the court should be expanded, but I'll take it a little different tack on it. For us just to continue to have democratically and small d, democratically elected governments, it's imperative that we have a court that will be open to the actual will of the people and not be beholden to political interest, because the court we have now is not a good faith court. I mean, the stuff they're ruling on, that case right now is so scary that's before them with the legislative, the one legislative theory where Rehnquist was one of the people who started this theory, but it's basically where they want to strip any powers over elections away from being able to be appealed to any state court. So they would say if a legislature in Oklahoma decides that they're going to change the rules, or they're going to say, hey, we're not going to count the votes in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, we're only going to count the rule votes. Then if that was to be appealed to the state courts, they would say the Supreme Court wants to say state courts have no jurisdiction over that. It rests solely with the state legislative body. And that's a scary proposition, because you're going to have some states at that point where when the Republicans control them, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to say who won the election.
Right. And then you don't really have a democracy.
That's
you have
exactly.
You have a dictatorship per state. And so, and it wouldn't be a far stretch to say eventually that thought process reaches DC, and we actually have a presidential race that ends like that.
Well, the states are the ones who control the state elections of federal officials. So that's where you have a state where, let's say, just go back to the 2020 scenario, and where you go, the state of Pennsylvania goes, yeah, we just think that, some of these votes in Philadelphia just seem they just don't seem right to us. So therefore, we're going to, as a state legislature, we're going to decide we're not going to count the votes in Philadelphia that were counted after 8 p.m.
Right.
Any vote that came in after 8 or was counted after 8 p.m., we're not going to count it. We're just going to throw those out. Suddenly, Pennsylvania's electoral college votes go to Trump.
Right.
They certify it as the legislature. Boom.
Yeah.
They're the sole. If the Supreme Court decides this way, they're the sole arbiter of this, and they get to make the decisions. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Expanding the court is essential. And the other thing I would say is, they've got to look at ways, and I don't know if you tell me what your thoughts are on this. I don't know if it would have to be a constitutional amendment. I don't know if they could legislatively do it, but I feel like they need to pass some kind of a law, like I said, either a constitutional amendment or a federal law establishing a panel of ethics that reviews Supreme Court justices' activities, because these people have lifetime appointments. They have no one that ever looks at their ethics. And you look at at Clarence Thomas still ruling on cases about January 6th, right? And his wife was there. You got Sam Alito talking about making jokes about African American kids dressed up as Ku Klux Klan members.
Right.
And talking about Ashley Madison dating sites to one of the single female justices on the court. And all the while complaining about the leak of the Roe decision, overturning Roe, when he's most likely was the leaker of the Hobby Lobby case.
Right. Well, no, we have documented evidence from people saying he was the leaker of the Hobby Lobby case.
Well, I see most of them, that's what they say. I have not seen the documentation of it. So
right. Well, I mean, we've
got
multiple people coming out and saying that they were at the party where he bragged about the Hobby Lobby case, right, and the outcome. So I don't think he leaked the Roe decision. I could be wrong about that. I think Roberts leaked the Roe decision to try and get him to reverse it. And a lot of people said,
go ahead,
if Roe hadn't been on the ballot, basically, if they hadn't released that decision, and I had a conversation with a guy at Costco the other day about it, and he said, the Supreme Court really screwed the Republicans. And I was like, how so? And he goes, they didn't have to release that opinion. And, not knowing how the court works, they definitely had to release the opinion. Once they took the case by July 1st, they have to release all those opinions.
Yeah.
And as far as an ethics panel, they don't need a constitutional amendment. Now, they could just pass a law. Congress could, because Congress really, it's funny how the framers set it up, because it is that third branch of government, but really it's beholden to Congress for its budget and the makeup, oversight and all that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, there you go. They should pass that in a heartbeat
well,
because
the problem with that is as we see with the new Republican controlled House, is we've gotten to the point where whenever one party does something, 2 years later or 4 years later, the other party comes in and just reverses it. So if you wanted to make it permanent, if you wanted to have a permanently, fixture of an ethics commission, it would need to be a constitutional amendment. And I
yeah,
believe,
I would just be like, are they really going to strike that down? Would the Republicans really strike it down? I mean, who's not for more ethics? Who's not for more ethical review of these people?
right? And do you know
I guess
offhand how many state legislatures the Democrats control now?
I don't. I think it's a majority of the 50, but I don't know. I think I want to say 27 or 28.
I'm trying to look that up.
So Senator Warnock's taking the stage now, and he's giving his acceptance.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's been on
acceptance.
for about 10 minutes here on
Yeah.
MSNBC. So, current competent.
So we've got lame duck session coming up.
Yeah, we've got the lame duck session coming up, and then and there's a few things that they expect to try and get passed in that. And in the lame duck session, it'll be interesting to see how Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema vote, because their power has really been curtailed with this election tonight. And so currently, it's with 99% of the vote in, it's 50.8 to 49.2 Warnock, and he leads by about 57,000 votes out of about 3.3 million cast.
Everybody knew it was going to be close, way closer than it should have been.
Yeah.
But we're so tribal now, where you got people voting red team or blue team no matter what.
Right.
It's a huge win. I mean, for Reverend Warnock to win, like I said, 4 elections in 2 years. I don't know if anybody's done that kind of.
Right.
I mean, it's 4 statewide for the same seat.
Right.
So, but it's just a testament. He's a great campaigner. He's done a great job. But yeah, lame duck session. You've got the potential for. I think the government funding bill has to be passed. I think Democrats are going to try to pass a debt ceiling raise.
Right.
They'd love to pass like a 2-year version of it. I think they should just get rid of it.
Well, here's the thing, and I know that Biden has done a lot to bring down the deficit that ran out of control during the Trump years, but some part of me thinks that they ought to keep the deficit, the ceiling, and try to live within their means. What do you think?
I think deficits are a myth. I
Right.
think when you're the currency maker, there really are no deficits. I mean,
Right.
I think we've had a deficit since we've had a country. And
Yeah. Well, the first time it became a campaign issue, do you know when that was? And we've talked about it before.
I do, but was it Jefferson? Jefferson and
Thomas Jefferson, 1800.
Yep.
Yep.
And so we've had a deficit, and people have said it's going to be our downfall forever. And what people don't understand is it's all on paper.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all on paper. Joe Biden, he could do it tomorrow. He could call up the Secretary of Treasury and say, "Hey, I want you to issue a $4 trillion coin."
Yep.
And then once you issue that coin, I want you to walk that over to the management and budget office, and I want you to say, "For payment in full of the deficit."
Yep.
And it'd be gone. He could do that. So I think do I think living within your means is important? I do, but I also think, how many failed businessmen have we seen that have run, particularly at the state levels, as a governor? I'm going to run this government like a business. We're going to run it like a business. And you go, you know what? When hurricanes hit, we don't look and go, yeah, sorry, we don't have money in our till for that. So guess you guys are on your own.
Well, Trump did.
Yeah.
When it hit Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Yeah. Well, he went down and threw some paper towels at them.
Right.
But so I think they should either eliminate the debt ceiling vote, because it's just a way to try to hold government spending hostage. And the fact of the matter is, they always go, oh, we're issuing new money. No, with all you're doing is guaranteeing you're going to pay what you've already run up.
Right.
And so nobody has a problem when we and I'm all for the Ukrainian war, don't get me wrong, because I think we ought to support Ukraine. And I think they're kicking some major ass over there. But nobody, very few people raise a red flag when we buy military equipment for that and run into a deficit.
Right.
So I just think that it's way out of proportion when you're the monetary. Now, where it becomes a real problem is for countries that have joined the European Union, and they have a single currency.
Right.
When you no longer are the issuer of the currency, it's a huge problem to have a deficit at that point.
Right. Let's touch on the Ukraine war for just a second. And I want to tell you something that I heard that really kind of alarmed me. So I don't know if you've seen the latest developments, but inside Russia proper was a military installation. I want to say an ammunition dump, but I might be wrong about that. But a military installation that was attacked and pretty well destroyed by drone strikes. And nobody's claimed responsibility. Everybody thinks it was the Ukrainians. And they asked Anthony Blinken what he thought, and he didn't. He gave an answer that said, "We're not condoning these strikes, but we're also not telling Ukraine where to, how to defend themselves." Right. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was that if it were Harry Truman or LBJ or even probably Eisenhower, they would have said something like, "You're in a war. You strike wherever you think you're going to be the most effective." And that's what the Ukrainians did. And it just, to me, it showed how far the world has come in, basically tiptoeing around, the issue. Just call it what it is, man. Ukraine is doing what they can to defend their sovereign borders. And if that means taking the fight to Russia, then that's what they did.
Yeah. Well, I think you're dead on. I just think that people like Blinken get put in a hot box sometimes, and it's tough to, they got to be careful what they say when they're trying to negotiate at the same time behind the scenes.
Right.
So he plays it pretty safe a lot of the times, but yeah, I mean I saw a headline I saw on a website today was Russian shocked that people they attack might attack them back.
Right.
And it's like, yeah. If you're shooting missiles at civilian sites in our country and we get missiles too, we're going to shoot those back at you.
Well, and you got to give it up to the Ukrainians. So far, all of their attacks inside Russia, and there haven't been that many, but they've been on military installations. They haven't targeted the population. And the other thing that I find really interesting is, where is Vladimir Putin? Haven't heard squat from that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we might have seen the last of dear old Vlad.
Well, there's been rumors for weeks that he's been sick, and then he has some type of liver disease or something. I thought Raphael Warnock's mom just about passed out on stage.
Yeah, he's hugging her right now. It has to be.
Look, yeah, she's weak.
Yeah. And she's, what do you think? She's probably 70.
I think probably 80.
Yeah. So, her grandmother was probably had ties to the slaves.
Absolutely.
And so for her to see her son be elected to a full term as a Georgia senator in the U.S. Senate. Man, that's got to be
Well, we talked about it last time in the runoffs. I mean, for Georgia to elect an African American and a Jewish man,
right.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's
and I'm looking on stage here. I see whites, blacks, Asians, young, old. I mean, it's a coalition,
yeah.
you know.
And I think they got a blueprint to move forward. I think the part that hurt Stacey Abrams in the election was I think voters in Georgia wanted to reward Brian Kemp for standing up to Trump.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Plus, he's a pretty popular governor in that state. They like him.
Well, there's a lot of stuff he's done that's been pretty right wing and radical.
Right.
But I just think that people, there's a lot of people that have had enough of Trump. And
Yep.
the question is, and maybe we can end on this note, but the question is, at what point will elected Republicans in Washington, what will be their breaking point? What will be the point? What will be the point that causes their colloquial nuts to drop, where they finally are men or are grown-ups?
Well, I think
And
we've seen it.
stand up to them.
I think we've seen it. I think it happened here in just the last few days when Trump came out on his Truth Social and basically said they should suspend the Constitution and give me the election that was rightfully stolen from me.
Well, I'm gonna push back on you though. I'm gonna ask who really stood up to him.
Well, today, as a matter of fact, John Cornyn and Ted Cruz both came out and said he was in the wrong.
I'm going to disagree with you. They said that if you read their statements, they never say his name.
Right, but you know who they're talking about. I mean,
yeah, but it's a groveling, sniveling statement. Like Ted Cruz said, the Constitution will endure for millennia, and I was like,
well, I don't know about that.
Millennia or Melania,
right?
But it was positioned just enough where I can hear Ted Cruz going, "Now listen, Donald, I never said your name. I never said I was against what you did, sir." And so I just, what I want to see is I want to see elected Republicans say these words. I want to hear them say what Donald Trump has said about the Constitution is wrong. It's illegal. And if he's the Republican nominee for president, I won't vote for him. That's what I want to hear.
Right.
So you give me some people saying that, I'll feel like they're pushed back. But they're saying, well, now, I've heard some other ones where they're like, well, he says a lot of things. And, I think he may have misspoke. And, he's walked it back. That's what I think McCarthy tried to say, that he's walked it back already. And I haven't heard him walk it back. He tried to. He said he didn't say what he said.
Right. So speaking of McCarthy, and I know we need to go, but on our next podcast, we ought to talk about his chances for the speakership.
Yeah, it's getting worse by the day.
Yeah. So that'd be a good topic.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey,
all right,
man,
everybody.
Great visiting with everybody. Send us some emails, drop us a line, follow us on social media.
Absolutely. Have a good night, everybody, and congratulations to Raphael Warnock.
51-49.
Yep. Bye-bye.